The cover, let's try this again. Make sure we got this on. There we go. The cover for Coldplay's new album, Viva La Vida, is inspired from a painting by Eugene Delacroix, which was painted in 1830. And it's based on the July 1830 revolution in France, which was a step in a series of steps wherein France moved from an absolute monarchy, wherein the people had very little rights and freedoms, to a free citizenship where the people had freedoms and inalienable rights. So they moved more toward a democracy. And this was Delacroix's most famous work. He depicted liberty personified by Marianne, who became a symbol of the nation of France. And she's striding over a mound of corpses, barefoot, and if you didn't notice, bare-breasted. The ultimate image of being free from tradition and convention and shackles. The Phrygian cap that she's wearing on her head had also come to symbolize liberty in the 1789 revolution in France. The fighters who are standing around her are a mix of different classes, which you would never have had prior to the French Revolution. You see the man with the top hat, he represents the upper class, and then the boy next to her with the pistols represents the bourgeoisie, or the middle class, the working class. What these fighters have in common, regardless of what class they belong to, is the fierceness and the determination in their eyes. And next to this, you can see Coldplay. They've overimposed this image with the words Viva La Vida. So they've painted the words Viva La Vida over the original, Long Live Life. And I believe that what this is calling for, I believe the band is calling for, a revolution wherein people actually live their lives with passion and with vitality. In other words, the thread through the album is don't let anyone or anything hold you back from living an abundant life. Well, this month's series at River City is a revolution of sorts. As I mentioned last week, it's high time that River City Church begin living with vitality and passion again. And we want this vitality and passion to be irrepressible. And so that begs the question, well, how are we going to generate this kind of white-hot passion and vitality at River City Church? And the answer is by going back to the foundation, going back to the 8 core values that this church was founded upon. And so over the next 3 weeks, we're going to look at those 8 core values. And they're like the grid through which we make ministry decisions. They're like the framework that we use when we put together a ministry budget for how to impact the city for Jesus Christ. They also help us to discern how we're going to be a unique church in this community, how we might be different from some of the other churches. And they keep us from growing complacent when it comes to what's most important. Now, if you're a Coldplay fan, as I am, then you know that the lyrics of some of their songs are more difficult to distinguish than others. Last week, we looked at the song Lost off their most recent album, and I mentioned that the lyrics are pretty easy to interpret to the song Lost. Well, this week's song is 42, the one the band just sang just moments ago. And this would definitely fit in the more difficult category. Last May, Entertainment Weekly interviewed Chris Martin, the lead singer of Coldplay, and they asked them specifically, what does the song 42 mean? And he essentially said it's a nod to the band U2 and their song 40, as well as 1979 by the Smashing Pumpkins. And then I quote, "I don't think you can try to be the best band in the world without having a song that's a number." That's really all he said, which really doesn't tell you anything about the song, just about the title of the song. So I guess the interpretation is wide open. And if you blog this song, you'll see people arguing all different things based on their interpretation. Some people who try to critique or understand what 42 means are obviously fans of the movie Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and they say, well, the song 42, it must be called 42 because of the number 42, which in the movie is the answer to the ultimate question of life, the universe, and everything. And so they believe that Coldplay is alluding to that they're not going to give us fluff. They're going to actually have lyrics and a message of some substance. But who knows, right? But here's what we do know. We do know that the Song 42 is a musing or a reflection on the topic of death. It's a musing on death. Not death in an impersonal kind of way, like when we watch the evening news and they cover war, or they cover riots, or they cover the death that we hear about all the time, but death in an intensely personal sort of way, as when we lose someone who's near to us, someone that we loved. And I believe that we've become anesthetized against the impersonal death. We hear about it all the time. We hear about wars and rumors of war. We see it all the time. We see it in the newspaper. We see it in printed media, in magazines. We see it on the internet, on the television. And I'm sure that percentage-wise, we don't see any more death today, or death isn't happening more frequently than it has in the past. I think the death rate has hovered right around 100% for a very long time. But this impersonal death is something that we're exposed to in unprecedented proportions. We're a visual culture. We see it all the time. That personal death, however, the kind wherein we lose someone who's near to us, I think that's the kind we try not to think about. We try to avoid thinking about the death of a loved one. We don't want to think about that, do we? Let alone think about our own death. In fact, in the 13 years that I've been a pastor, I would say I've noticed this growing trend toward avoiding funerals. Fewer and fewer people are prone or comfortable going to a funeral. If a coworker dies, in bygone years, everybody from the company or the organization would go to the funeral. Today, a fewer percentage of people go. It's almost like they're afraid that if they go to a funeral home, they're going to catch something, as though, the Grim Reaper might smite them or something. I don't know. And as a consequence, today's funerals are getting smaller and smaller. Many families don't even have funerals anymore. They might have a visitation or a wake, a viewing, but they might just skip the funeral altogether. I've counseled sons and daughters in families of multiple children who were unwilling to go to their mother or father's funeral, not because of a rift in the family, but because they said funeral homes make them uncomfortable. Funeral homes make them uncomfortable. I think funeral homes make everybody uncomfortable. But people are far more to ask life's important questions when they've experienced death at that personal level, when they've lost someone who matters a lot to them. Which is probably why God's Word tells us something that's seemingly shocking in Ecclesiastes chapter 7. Listen to this, verse 2. You can read it on the screen. Better to spend your time at funerals than at parties. Better to spend your time at funerals than at parties? After all, everyone dies, so the living should take this to heart. And then verse 4, a wise person thinks a lot about death, while a fool thinks only about having a good time. So let's take the advice from this wisdom passage. Let's spend a moment thinking about death. When was the last time that you experienced death at that personal level? When was the last time you lost someone that meant a lot to you, means a lot to you? Why don't you just take a moment and discuss the when and the who with the person next to you. Just take a minute here.